So when we jump in with the church, that is our first priority, Sean, is assessment, because we want to understand our starting point. We want to understand where we have some strength, where we have some gaps. And so we do objective assessments and subjective assessments so that we know, again, what our starting point is. And one of the assessments I wanted to share today is just something we call staffing best practices. To show you one example from a church where we did this assessment. So we went through each of these staffing best practices, and you can see they've got their governance in line there. And they actually, number 7 there, are great at, championing both performance and health. But if you start to look where we're turning red, number 6 there, leaders are intentionally developed. Their communication systems aren't healthy. And 2 and 3 then also, are just on that edge of still being red. So this helps us inform as we get into the end of the engagement, when we get to action, where we really need to put our attention for the next 12 months. How are we going to get more of these best practices in line and turning green? The last 2 assessments that come to mind that I think every church should lean into before they go into a restructure is just an assessment of overall performance of each person, as well as an assessment of their current and future leadership capacity. So, when we're on site, we go through this diagnostic conversation around the performance of each team member. I've probably said this before, but it used to just bug me years ago when a highly visible church leader would talk to a crowd of other church leaders and say things like, every year we rate our employees, we identify our A's, B's, and C's, and we fire the C's. And I would just shake my head, because that is such a short-sighted and irresponsible way, I think, to deal with employee performance. I think employee performance processes like this set you up to actually coach your team better. I mean, a lot of us are in ministry. We don't come arrived in all of these skills. People like on my team, I go, God's put them in my care. It's my job to be diagnostic about where are they winning, where are their gaps, and how can I help them? So our process is much more diagnostic than A, B, and C. And here, let me just show you an example. And I have changed the names to protect the innocent. But before I actually look at the results of this assessment, you can see up there, we're looking at the basics, right? Character, chemistry, competence. This church didn't have their culture defined yet, so I wasn't able to help them with this. But let me talk about the outcome of a conversation like this. I think it is so helpful for the lead pastor or the senior leaders, because here's the truth. The lead pastor really only sees one side of the employee, but they rarely see the full picture. I guess that could be said about every leader, but the senior leader sits in a unique seat, and everyone wants to have a good face for them. So when you have a conversation with a small group of leaders, there's just great learnings, both positive and sometimes discouraging as we talk about our leaders. But you can tell in this exercise by looking at this chart, it has such a great reveal, and it gives pastors confidence when they're considering promoting someone to a higher level leadership role. And it also gives them confidence when they have to lean in on a tough conversation. So you can see employee A and employee I, neither of them were thriving in any of those areas, character, chemistry, and competence. And the church leader kind of knew this coming into the conversation. But when you see the span of score from 18 to their top performer there at 648, then you're like, we have some real issues. You look at the 2 top performers, B and J, then you're going to start to go, well, those are the people we maybe should lean into and look at their leadership capacity next. And should we be doing something different with them? And for the rest of them, it just gives you, again, this is how I can coach this person. For instance, if we look at employee E there, they have great character. They're competent in their role. I actually think this person was newer to their role, which is why that competency number is a little lower. But if you look at the chemistry score at 5, that just tells me this person has some blind spots that they need a good manager to coach them through so they can see what it's like to be on the other side of them. Because nobody wants to be outside the normal curve when it comes to chemistry. But the truth is we all do things that we can't see in ourselves. Vice versa, if you look at employee F, competence is great, but look at that character score. That's an intervention conversation. Character is such a huge thing, well, anywhere in life, but leading a ministry, that's got to either be turned around or we're not going to move forward with that. So all that to say, clarity is a word I hear every time I go through this conversation. Brings clarity to the right next moves that the church needs to make from a personnel standpoint. And then quickly, lastly, we just talk through current and future leadership capacity on the team. So we're going to look at this leadership capacity chart and talk about who are our doers today, Who are our people who are more like modeling for people how to do ministry? Who's actually leading other people, responsible for them, building teams, and then who is leading other leaders? And then we look at that conversation and go, and who has upward potential? But those two conversations really create a picture of who you should be investing in your restructure, plus a solid basis for ongoing coaching.